Walk us through what we've got so far from Microsoft, because investors seem a little disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really find a whole lot of mistakes in these numbers. And you look at Azure growth of 39%. I mean, given that size, that's pretty good. The margins actually stood out way higher than what we were anticipating. We thought there was going to be pressure on margins because of all the spending. And then lastly, when you look at the CapEx number, substantially higher than the 30 billion that they talked about. Now, to some people, maybe that's a disappointment, but for us, that's a good thing because I think they have so much demand coming in. They're going to add more capacity this year, and that's something that we have been saying for a while.
I'll ask you the same question that I asked Angelo Zeno a little earlier, and maybe it's too early to tell. Maybe we won't hear anything about it on the call, but the cloud race between the three biggest providers out there, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, is there an opportunity for Azure to get market share from companies that might have been affected by last week's AWS outage? Is that an opportunity?
Well, typically I would say no, because they are facing the same problem today, frankly. So when you look at some of these large install bases, it's very difficult to change your applications. But what is the big opportunity, not just for Amazon or not just for Microsoft, but for all of them, including Oracle, is most companies eventually will have a backup cloud provider. They don't have it right now, but that is going to be one of the bigger growth drivers down the road after the AI boom is done. So, I mean, from our side, the market is big enough for all of them to prosper very, very well in the coming years.
I mean, Anurag, as you said, the Azure Cloud Computing Unit posted a 39% revenue gain in the quarter when adjusting for currency fluctuations. That did beat the street estimate of 37%. I'm reading some, analysis that says, well, that was a disappointed. The expectations were high. What was there a whisper number in terms of growth on the street?
No, the consensus was 37. This is what the company said. Okay. Now, if you really want to dissect it, badly, then you could say, well, Google Cloud growth accelerated in the quarter compared to the previous quarter. For Microsoft, it was 39. It's still at 39. But there are different bases. That one's, Microsoft is running at about 75 to $80 billion in annual run rate. Google Cloud is still at 30%, and yet Azure growth is higher than Google's cloud growth. So I think people are probably just splitting hairs at this point.
Yeah, and you referenced that when you were answering my question. You referenced the outage that Microsoft has having right now, this global Microsoft outage. So we should note that, just cloud companies are cloud companies, and sometimes it's AWS that has the outage, sometimes it's Microsoft that has the outage. Hey, the OpenAI question. We talked a lot about this with you yesterday, and I imagine that on the call, investors will have a lot of questions about, okay, this close to 30% ownership of OpenAI, the parent company of ChatGPT. What is that going to do for Microsoft?
See, I think from our side, the equity part is not what, for our concern. It's really the technology that Microsoft is holding on to. That's really the critical piece because, one of the ways we think about is they will sell more products. They will sell more cloud services using that technology than they would just on the, share side of it. And that's a bigger thing for us because they have, a hold of that for the next 7 years.
Hey, one of the things I want to ask you, and I know this isn't typically your coverage, but you're smart and you cover all things technology. But Meta down almost 8% here in the aftermarket. As you see this, what's this one-time tax charge? I guess we're still trying to figure this out. But is it all about that, or is it just that we were caught off guard?
See, I think that could be a lot of the noise than the number, and I'm very sure they're going to give clarity on that. But the big question or the overhang on Meta always is, how are you monetizing AI? You're spending all this money. Where is the revenue you show for it? I think that's where management really needs to give and address that in a much more succinct way than they have. The other side is they don't have a cloud platform, just like Google does or Amazon does or Microsoft does. So Meta is the one that needs to explain these things far better than, frankly, the other three.